for joining us again. We are here with Andre Dubus III, award-winning author from the University of Massachusetts Lowell, and he lives in the Merrimack Valley. So, Andre, I want to ask you, and maybe you could help with some of the students, when you sit down and you're writing a story, do you have the ending all mapped out? Do you have the story all mapped out?
No, not at all. And I encourage my students not to map theirs out either. I mean, if they want, if it works for them, they certainly can do whatever they want. But no, it's been my experience that the more I know about a story, the worse I do in executing it. And especially if I'm trying to say something with a piece of fiction, I kill it. And again, what we were saying earlier, for me, the stories that seem to be the freshest and have some, well, ironically, the ones that seem to have more truth in them, imaginal truth, are the ones that I discovered by going from one moment to the next. So I'll begin with maybe a situation. Maybe I read about a woman who's kicked out of her house, and so I'll imagine the first scene, and I'll imagine her, lying on the cold back seat of her Impala, and then I'll think, well, does she have to go to the bathroom, and where's she going to go? And then before I know it, she's at a gas station and she's using the bathroom, and then she has no toothpaste, so she goes into the convenience store, and there she meets a guy named Roberto. And now I'm with them together in the car, and they're driving somewhere to buy a lotto ticket. I'm telling you, it's not unlike how you tell stories to your kids, where you just sort of say, well, there was a froggy, and then, oh, it was a hot day. And then, but here's where it gets really mysterious. Some things will take and others won't. One of the things I find myself saying a lot in writing classes, I do think there's a difference between imagining something and making it up. I think you can write a really good scene, but it doesn't mean it happened. And that's when you have to ask yourself, are you imposing it on the narrative, or did it actually happen? And usually we discover these things while writing, and we as writers don't want them to happen because it means more research or it changes our idea. And I say, can your idea go with what's alive in the piece? So I'm a big believer in just letting it go.
You say let it go, but do you feel like it changes between novel and short story? Do you think short story, you have to have the perfect beginning, perfect ending?
Yes, I think when in the final draft, well, my father was a great short story writer, and I would argue that 99% of his work, the first line is the perfect first line for that story, and the last line is a perfect last line, and every line in between has to be just right for it to be a great story. In that sense, I think the short story is a higher artistic form. Faulkner actually had a great line. He said, when the writer begins, he tries his hand at poetry. When he fails at that, he tries to write the short story. And when he can't do that either, he ends up writing novels. But I think what you're talking about is revision. And I would certainly tell students this. Don't worry about how beautiful the first line is in your first drafts. Just get the story out of you. Give birth to the baby. To worry about every sentence being beautiful while you're discovering the story, to me, is like having a baby and while it's all gooey and bloody, dressing it and combing its hair. Just let the gooey baby out. Don't you love that analogy?
No. Do you use experiences from your own life?
Yeah, probably. I say probably because I don't really know.
Or from your friends?
Yeah, and colleagues. No, I think every writer does. I think it's a weird mix. The psyche is wild and mysterious and unfathomable. I mean, Gustave Flaubert, who wrote one of the greatest novels, Madame Bovary, would say, in French, je suis Madame Bovary, I am Emma, of course he wasn't. I wrote a story, this prison story, I've never been to a prison. I was in a halfway house. The whole story takes place in prison. I heard some nice things from inmates about it, which was very encouraging, but I said, well, I think what allowed me to find the emotional truth of being an inmate in prison is I went to 14 schools before I got to high school. So I was always a new kid, so I knew what it was like to step into a public schoolyard about to get my butt kicked, simply because I was a new kid. And by the way, I had glasses. Oh. And I used words like actually. So it's not a far cry to imagine that I'm not just going to get beat up in the schoolyard, I'm going to get raped and stabbed.
Oh.
And that's what I'm saying, though. Grace Paley has a great line, and I probably quote her too much, but she said, we write what we don't know we know. Just because you haven't had the literal experience doesn't mean you don't have some, some sort of insight into its emotional truths. Again, that's the power of empathy, which we all have, not just writers.
I think I should tell you, in a little bit of my writing,
Yes.
I made you one of the characters. Only because it was your
Oh, every story needs a villain.
It was the boots. Actually, you're a priest. And the priest
Like I said, every story needs a villain. I'm kidding. I'm just kidding.
You have the black cowboy boots, so.
Really? I'm
Yeah.
honored. Are they lizard skinned?
John?
I guess I have a question about, do you feel to be a successful writer, you have to have a tough background, like you said you had? Do you feel you have to at some point have been, like a lot of your writing centers around alcoholism, prison, poverty,
Rape?
murder, suicide?
God, I didn't even know that. That's all. Is that all in there?
Yes.
So do you feel you can't write a happy story nowadays?
Oh, you mean on me personally, or what I hear you asking?
Not even you personally, just in general. It seems
Right.
like we have a very negative. What we like on the big screen, what we like in our books, is very negative, very sad, very.
Well, I don't know. I think what we like on the big screen is pretty happy. I mean, I think most Hollywood films that are trying to make money end happily. And if you look at a European film,
That's true.
European films they end more like life ends, which is doesn't have to be a tragic ending. But it's not happy. It's gray, which is more like our lives, which is frankly, to me, more food for the soul. Because I think what the soul requires, not just mine, is the truth. And we don't want to be lied to. We know that most stories don't end happily ever after, but they can end joyously with some loss, with some setbacks. But to answer your question about creativity and maybe a rough childhood, I don't think so. I mean, I am convinced that the imagination is incredibly miraculous and mysterious. And I truly believe that whether you've grown up in a sheltered middle-class home where mom and dad did not get divorced and nobody was beating each other up and you got 3 meals a day and lots of hugs, I know for a fact that those people can write dark, twisted tales too. Does experience hurt? Never. It always helps to have had experience. But I really trust the imagination enough. I don't think you need to go out and get it. I really don't, even though it can certainly serve you. I really don't, because I truly believe in this incredibly divine gift we've all been given called the imagination.
Can you tell me your belief in literary fiction over genre fiction, or what your feelings towards genre fiction, which you don't do?
Let's define it, though. I mean, for me, literary fiction tends to be character-driven fiction, where you're reading it because the people become real very quickly on the page, and you're interested in what happens to them. As opposed to maybe genre fiction, which there are all kinds, and there are all levels of quality. I'm thinking about maybe a Tom Clancy novel where you've got a lot of submarines and missiles and things blowing up, and characters kind of jumping through hoops. That's a perfectly fine story to read, and it's entertained millions. It's not my cup of tea, because for me, what draws me to books and to art in general is a search to see me reflected back. Not just little old Andre, but I think my humanity. I think that's what we do when we go to art. We are actually asking the art to give us back. And I think it's a hunger that we have as literally real as thirst and our need for food. So in that sense, I prefer literary fiction because it tends to be character-driven. Although I don't like all of it, of course, because we all have different tastes. But does that make any sense?
So in a way, you're saying you feel the job of the author is more to teach than to entertain?
Well, I don't even think it's to teach. But I'm with you. I definitely don't think. I'll speak for myself only. I'm not trying to entertain anybody, and that sounds. You know what? As I say it, it sounds elitist. What do I mean by that? I believe that our culture has got enough entertainment going on. And I guess the way I equate that is I think that I look at entertainment as escape. I think if you're reading literature or if you're in the presence of art, I'm not talking about what I try to do, but what anybody tries to do. If you actually achieve art, the reader will get more than just an escape from his or her life and entertainment. You will actually plunge more deeply into your own humanity, which is actually going to make you feel more alive before you're dead, which can actually bring you to a greater level of awareness, which can actually embolden your day and your life. And that way,